All right, so just a quick word about me. So I'm, oh, what's that? Go ahead. So my name's Alan Eardley. I work as the head of modern workplace for a consultancy, CPS. So I do quite a lot with clients around security, compliance, Power Platform, all sorts of different things. I'm an MVP in Office Apps and Services. I'm also the hat of Grey Hat Beard, and I help run the London Power Platform user group as well. So what am I going to cover? Well, I'm going to cover a problem that I think most of us will be quite familiar with. Obviously a solution. It would be rubbish if I didn't show you a solution to the problem. I'm going to go through a lot of demos as well. So most of this will be demos, and then I'm just going to recap on the benefits. So the problem I'm going to cover is, I guess, what happens with users when they start in a new organization. The first question that they're always going to ask is, well, where can I find stuff? What teams should I have access to? What SharePoint sites should I have access to? Who do I ask for these permissions? Usually those permissions might need approval. Most organizations don't really have an approval process for those permissions. So it's usually a matter of, well, I'm going to go to IT. I'm a new starter. Can you give me some permissions to stuff I need? Now, that's great if you're a new starter, but actually the more common thing is, other than being a new starter, what happens when users are actually moving, when they're joining, when they're moving, when they're leaving, when they maybe join a project? So maybe it's a temporary assignment that they have. We assemble a project team, we need them for a while, and then we don't need that team anymore. So we disband it because the project's completed. We might have external users coming in for that as well. So we might need to actually manage, are those users needed to have their access all the time, or maybe it's a temporary allocation. So just when you put a project team together, all of those users need to come together. They all need to know that actually these are all the resources they need for that particular project. And then obviously with permanent employees, when you change jobs, what happens to the permissions that you've had? I'm sure you've all been in situations where, you move jobs, so therefore you go to that new role, you get assigned a new set of permissions, but then somebody from the previous team that you worked in comes and goes, can you just do this for me because you seem to still have permissions? It's really common. And most organizations, they don't really look to manage these permissions particularly effectively. So when an organization is trying to manage these permissions for a particular user, the big question is, who knows what permissions you need? So, it's, who do I go to? Do I go to my manager? Does my manager know all the permissions that I need in a role? If I'm working on multiple projects, then does my manager know which projects I'm working on and which permissions I need to work on that particular project? Maybe it's just the project manager who's managing that project. They know what you need. They also know who needs those permissions. So they know when people should have those permissions revoked. They don't always go back to IT and say, actually, can you just remove the permissions from Fred over there because he's no longer on the project? And can you add them to Jane over there because she's come onto the project? Usually it's easier just to have an open permission model where actually it doesn't matter who has access. And that might be a viable option. But in most cases, those permissions will be assigned and they are forgotten. They're never going to be revoked. They're never going to be reviewed. 6 years after changing role, if you're still in the organization, you may still find that you have access to the things that you had on day one, even though your role may have changed and you may no longer need access to those areas. So understanding who actually manages those permissions is really important. What permissions does any single employee need at a given time based on their job role and what they're working on? It's actually really important. Obviously, internally, that's one thing. But now that we're starting to collaborate with external parties more often, it gets a bit more complicated. I mean, I'm sure everybody who uses Teams, you might have permissions to more than one environment. If you're working in a consultancy and working on projects where you have partner organizations, you then have permissions that are allocated to you as a guest user in that particular environment. Now, if I'm running a project and I invite people in and I give them access to a team in my tenant, how do I know that they actually still need those permissions? You know, maybe I'm not the one who's actually managing who in that partner organization is working for my project. So one of the things that we need to manage is how we revoke those permissions, we review those permissions, and we make sure those external users only have the permissions they need at the time when they need them. So there's some common problems. I think probably most people are familiar with these sorts of problems, but there is also a solution, which is great. So the solution is called Entitlements. So it's part of Azure AD. And essentially what Entitlements does is it allows us to create a catalog of resources. And then within that catalog, we can assign permissions to people so they can actually create what we call access packages. Those access packages consist of a set of permissions, and they're managed as a unit of permissions. So we can actually publish them so that users can actually request them. We can have an approval process in them. So, you know, we can actually have somebody approve the request. And we can actually put multiple layers in there as well. So we could have, for example, the line manager and then the project manager approving access to a set of project permissions. But we then have reviewing access as well. So we've got access reviews built into this, and then we have automatic revoking the access at the end. So we have a full life cycle that we can actually manage, and we can delegate permissions. So we can actually delegate it out of IT, and we can even delegate it outside of the organization to guest organizations, external organizations. So it gives us a really powerful way to pull together multiple sets of permissions and actually package them up and allow self-service requesting of those permissions. As a user, I can actually go through and I can browse the available entitlements. So the access packages that have been published, I can browse them and I can see what I'm permitted to request. I can then request them, and then once approved, I have access. So all theoretically, and if the demo gods are on my side, I'll show you this, it all works very smoothly to actually manage that whole permissions lifecycle. So that's enough of the talking. Now I'm going to try and flip over and actually do some demos. So let's see, I've got quite a few different accounts that I actually need to demo here. So stop that. Right. So the first one that I'm going to do is the admin account. So I'm in Azure AD and I've got identity governance. So I've got it pinned. And identity governance has a bunch of different things. So if you're familiar with the privileged identity management, it has that in there. Access reviews basically allow you to check whether people still need access to your site, but that's done on a site-by-site basis. But what we're really interested in is the entitlement management. So I'm going to come into catalogs first, actually, because one of the things that I said is that we can create a catalog. So in here, I have several different catalogs set up. So one of them is PMO. So this is the one that I'm going to use today. And within PMO, I have various things here. So I have resources. So I have a set of different resources. And this is made up of various things. So groups and teams, applications, sites. So I can manage all of those because the permissions for all of those is managed through Azure. And from those resources, I can then create access packages. Now, you'll see here we've got 3 access packages. One is owner, one is member external, and one is member internal. So I'm basically packaging up different sets of permissions, and I'll step through these and show you what these actually look like. But this is basically giving me 3 different sets of permissions that I can publish to different audiences within my organization. And I can then see how many active assignments they have, how many active resources, the roles they have in there. So this means that I can say, actually, if I have a new project manager come on board, I have an access package for them, PMO owner, and that will give them owner permissions. If I have an internal project member, I have an internal package, and that will give them specific permissions, and that will have a specific approval process for internal users. And then I have one for external users. So I can then manage how those external guests can request access, and then actually the approval process will be different for them because they are external. And then I have roles and administrators as well. So I can actually create different roles. I can add package managers, assignment managers. So I can delegate some of this out of IT, and actually the people who are functionally owning these permissions and the resources that are within these, we can actually get them to manage these. So it's quite a powerful tool to have the access packages in place, the catalogs within place that define all the assets, the resources that we're actually going to use. So I'm going to create a new access package in here. So essentially we're going to give this a name, imaginative tech guy name, demo. And essentially that's the name that we're going to actually see when we choose this. So when we come through to the roles, what I have here is basically the resources that I want to give access to. So it's resource roles, because we're actually choosing, whenever we choose one of these, we're choosing either a site or a group. So in here we've got some teams. Actually, let me just come through to one of my other sites, and I should have set this up, so apologies. Let me just set this up. So this user is Gurney, and hopefully should see. So we should see, so we've got some sites here. Now, all staff, HR staff, that's the only things that we've got in here, and this one is Gurney. So what we'll see at the end is this will miraculously change if all goes according to plan. So if we just come back here, this one. So what we can do here, we've got our groups. These are the groups that are in the catalog. If I check this, I can see all groups that are in our organization. But because we're within the context of a catalog, I want to just manage these. So if I put those in here, and then what we see is this is a group, but we can actually choose the role. So do I want owner or member? So when I had the PMO owner, I can give them the owner role, and I can give different roles for different groups. So these are our groups and teams. So these are the ones that we will expect to see pop up within Teams for our user. I can choose applications as well. So again, I've got DevOps in here, and I can add that in. And I can also add, so I can got a default access role in there. And then I can also add SharePoint sites in here. So I've got a site in here as well. And essentially we're giving different permissions. So I can say just a visitor, read-only access essentially. So I can manage the permissions that I'm giving for each of these resources. When I come through to the requests, this is really saying who do we want to have access to it. So we might say none. This might be an IT role, an access package for IT that we don't actually want people to do as self-service. But we can say, so let's start with users in my directory. So I can actually choose specific users, all members excluding guests, or all users including guests. This is who I'm publishing this to. So anybody in here, they can actually select this. So if I say all members excluding guests require approval, I can say yes. Does it require a justification? So we'll leave that on. Do I want 2 steps? So I could say manager comes up as a default, or I can choose specific approvers. I can add a fallback. So if the manager doesn't respond, let's add me in there. And then basically here we've got how many days. So this request will be open for 14 days. We're not expecting an instantaneous response. We're expecting it within 14 days. I can reduce that down if I want, say 2. Approve a justification. If no action, forward on to alternate approvers. So I can do that as well. And I can then say alternate second second approvers, so second level manager, for example. So it goes up another level based on the Active Directory hierarchy. So a lot of this is built in to the Active Directory hierarchy. So I should check and see whether there are any questions coming through. No, okay. Cool. No hats. I might have a hat, but no hat today. Other things here, enable new requests and assignments. Do I want this to be on or off? So this is really setting it. It can be active or not, which basically means if I don't want anybody requesting it, they won't see it. Now, this is all for internal. So this manager as approver is obviously an internal role that we can see based on Active Directory. If I say users not in my directory, then I can actually start to control who. So specific connected organizations. So within this, I can actually manage a connected organization, put their domain in, and then that will basically restrict who this gets published to. And users in that organization can then see what we have published here. So I can configure connected organizations, or I can just say all. So that could be any organization or any new external users. I can't do approvals if it's any, but if it's connected organizations, I can actually do approval. So I can actually say yes. I can ask for the justification. And here we get the first approver being an external sponsor. So that basically means if we're working with a partner organization, somebody in that partner organization can be approving that the person who's requested access is actually supposed to be working on our project and therefore have access to our tenant. So it gives us that ability to essentially offload that first level of approval to an external organization. That way, our project manager might be approving and saying yes, but that external approver has the first say to say yes, that should be allowed or not. So some really nice ways to actually manage internally, our users internally, and external users. So let's just click onto the next one. So I can also put custom questions in here as well. So I can say, which project, for example, if there's multiple projects, and I can choose different formats in here. So short text, multiple choice. I can put in choices. I can say project A, B. So I can add in different custom information. And these questions are all designed to allow our approvers to really understand, should this person have access to our project and our teams and our resources. The next step is the life cycle. So access package assignments expire. So is it going to be available for a number of days? Maybe. It might be never. It's just going to carry on going. But it could be, on a particular date. So at the end of a financial year, we want to close off all of the projects, or we know this permission should be stopping after a number of days. We can put that information in here. If I put access reviews in, so let's put never in there. Access reviews allow us to have a periodic check. Does this person still need these permissions? Yes or no? So we can start a review and we can say, actually, we're going to run it monthly and it's going to last for, say, 4 days. And that 4 days is going to give us a period of time for the approver to go back through and go, yes, we know that this person still needs access to these sites and resources. And we can say self-review. I've never quite understood why you would do a self-review, or we can do specific reviewers. So we can say maybe our project manager is the person who needs to carry on reviewing these permissions to this particular project, or the HR director or the HR manager if it's an HR set of resources. So with all of this set up, basically we have the ability to say, what are we going to publish? What permissions to each of those resources are we going to publish? Who can request them? What is the approval process for those requests? And then what is the expiration of custom questions, and what is the expiration? So how are we going to revoke those permissions at the end? So that's kind of a breakdown of what we put into this request process. I'm going to, so I'm now going to cancel all the way out of that. So if I have a look at one of these, I'm going to look at the internal one. So when I come in to look at this internal one, the key thing here is that whilst we've defined this, we have this link. Now, the myaccess.microsoft.com is a little known link, not used very much, only for access reviews and entitlements. So if I now come over to Gurney, so hopefully I'm in as the right person here. Yep. So access packages. So this is request history. If I want to actually look at the access packages that are available, I can see them. If I look at the PMO member, I can choose to request it, and I can see questions. Which project will you be working on? Is it a temporary assignment? What's the business justification? Now, hopefully, I already have a request history and one that's in pending approval. So I've actually made this request already. And if I look at this, I can see that it's been submitted. And if I come over to my next user, so in here, this is the request that I made earlier. So this is the approval process. So I'm basically coming in here, I look at the details, and I can see the questions that have been asked. So I can see I need to demo entitlements. This is the demo that I'm working on. And so from there, I can put a reason. Again, imaginative reason. I can click on approve. That'll say that it's actually been successfully approved. And then I'll come through here and hopefully it's come through here. And again, this is the second level of approval. I can click in here. I can see the request details. I can see when it was requested, when it's due. I can see the approval history in here as well. I can see the package, and I can then say approved. Approve that. Again, that's been approved, which is good. So then if I come back to my original requester, so in here, I can see the history. So I can see if it's not been approved, I can see where it's up to, but I can also see that it has been approved and it is now delivering. So it's actually applying those permissions to my account. So theoretically, and if I come in here, all staff, HR staff, force it, and hopefully, fingers crossed, if it does it fast enough, it will pop up. Oh, it will pop up. Right, I'm going to go back to the presentation, finish that off, and then we'll pop back. Oh, there you go. As if by magic, I've just been added into those permissions. So Teams is updated because those permissions have actually been allocated to my account now. So let me come back to the presentation and just finish off. So what the demo did, I went through basically creating that access package and then showing how you actually browse, how you request an access package and what that approval process looks like. The review access at the end takes a little bit longer to get to, but essentially it's in that same interface as the approvers had to see those access reviews after a period of time. So key things here around the benefits. Now, with everything that's Microsoft, as certain people on the call know, the first thing we have to address is the licensing word. So licensing for this is Azure AD Premium P2. So if you have EM&S E5, then you're okay. If not, then you'll need to look at an uplift to Azure AD Premium P2. There's then all sorts of numbers about how many people are licensed and how many people are guests and how many people are using this. But essentially, the crux of the matter is you need to uplift in terms of the licensing. You don't need the full EM&S E5, but certainly Azure AD Premium P2. But once you do have that in place, the benefits are really, really clear for this. You can manage a catalog of permissions based on the role, the resources, what permissions you want to give to people. It is a self-service process. You can publish that externally as well. So that self-service is for external people, and you have confidence there's a full life cycle management there. So the permissions are revoked once they are expired. If they don't get renewed, then they are revoked. But you can put those access reviews in place so that you are asking on a regular basis, does this person still need these permissions? Yes or no? So it gives you confidence that actually, if at a click of a button, I can revoke the whole access package, a user will lose permissions to all of those particular resources within that access package. And because you can automatically revoke them, it means that you're less likely to have permissions lingering where you don't want them. The external users, it's a key thing here. The more we work with external users, we're encouraging people to come in and be guests in our environment so that we're working on single copies of documents, that we're collaborating together. Managing some of that external approval process is really important, because we're never going to necessarily know who in a partner organization is supposed to be working on our projects within our environment. So that integration works really, really well for us. So that is a very sort of whistle-stop tour of entitlements. Are there any questions?
I think sorry, I'm eating my dinner. I think Ben's got a comment in the questions around if you've got M365 E3, is there a licensing uplift to P2, or is it the
so you can do the uplift just to Azure AD P2. So we see a lot of clients opting for just that uplift in the Azure AD licensing rather than the full license for the full EMNS. Oh, how much? Oh, that's just a mean question to throw out, isn't it?
Sounds like a test question.
Yeah, speak to your licensing provider. No, off the top of my head, I think it's about £6 per user per month. Obviously, that wasn't too far off, was it? 6.708. But obviously, that does depend on how you are licensed, whether it's an EA or CSP, and what offers you can get.
Sounds good. And Al, are you seeing a lot of customers start using this feature?
We are seeing a lot of customers start using this feature. We're not seeing customers necessarily using it for all of their users, but certainly where they have secured areas where they need to manage the permissions. So HR, finance, it gives a really nice sort of security layer on top of that. If you are predominantly a sort of an open organization and you don't have a need to secure those areas, then there isn't so much benefit. But certainly those particular functions are benefiting from it. But also high compliance organizations, finance is using this a lot for certainly that collaboration. And some organizations are just using this for the external collaboration, just to be able to actually manage those entitlements for multiple sites, or just using the access reviews, which also needs the same license level.
Yeah, and I guess this is probably one of those hidden gems that unless the IT administrators or Office 365 administrators have been made aware of, it's hidden under the covers, isn't it? This sort of functionality.
Yeah, the access reviews have been around a while. The entitlements went GA last autumn, so they're relatively new, but they are, it is kind of hidden under the covers. People don't really recognize that it's there. They haven't shouted a lot about it. Akin, in terms of your question about including file share permissions into the package for approval, no, you can't do that in terms of the permissions, but what I would suggest for that is using sensitivity labels for groups and team and sites, and that way you can actually control whether guest users can be brought in and what file share permissions are included in those underlying teams. This is really just giving permissions to the teams and to the sites and to the applications that are authenticated through Azure AD.
Sounds good. Any more questions from anyone?
If not, if you do have questions later on, then feel free to reach out on Twitter or on LinkedIn. So Philip,
you got one more in there, Al.
this scenario, who needs an ADP2? Yes. Yes, so it does need the AADP2.
Yeah, who needs it? Just the person being given the rights.
They've got some really good documentation on it, but essentially, if I just come back to this one, so it's members who can request an access package. So if you're publishing those access packages out, if it's members and guests who request an access package, they need it. Anyone involved in the approval process as well. So as I say, if you are managing just for your HR department, just for your finance department, it would be those users because they are actually requesting an access package, and then whoever's approving those access packages. In terms of everyone, if you have a high compliance organization where all sites or a lot of sites are locked down, then yes, you can think of it as everyone, if they're all going to need an access package published to them. But most organizations we see are starting a bit smaller than that.
All right. Yeah, I don't think there's any more questions there. So thank you very much, Al, for that. It was really good. It's an area that personally I've heard of, but not really looked into it too much because yeah, it sort of doesn't come into my world too much. But yeah, that's really good functionality.
Yeah, it's nice the way it works automatically in the background. So yeah, as I say, if you've got any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or reach out on Twitter or LinkedIn.